Unit 2, Day 3.
Yes.
Solving. Actually, let's pause right there for a minute. Yesterday we factored, so you stopped at x plus 3, x minus 5, or whatever the factors were. Today you're solving. That means you need to get an answer. Get it down to x equals 3 and x equals 7, or whatever the answers are. So today you're going to get, yesterday you got answers. I shouldn't phrase it like that. Today you're going to get a value for x. Yesterday you stopped just short of getting a value for x. Today you're going to take it the next step and solve quadratics. So solving means figure out what x is. Quadratics, you remember what a quadratic is? Kind of, yes. Quadratic. What the shape is, what the equation looks like. Okay, it's a parabola. How do you know from the equation it's a quadratic? X squared. Now be careful, it's a little more technical than x squared. X squared is the highest power, is the sort of technical definition. Ax squared plus bx plus c, that might trigger an equation, another equation in your PTSD. It's not that bad.
This one.
All right, we're going to do 4 methods of solving them. In Algebra 2, this was like a unit. Like, we're going to solve quadratics this unit, and we're going to spend 1 day on each method, and then we'll test you over these 4 methods. But it's pre-cal, so it's like, remember this? We're going to do all 4 methods today, and that's going to be today's lesson. So again, it is review. You should remember it, but we'll go as slow as we can go to get it all in. So factoring is one method. So you got some practice yesterday with factoring. Let's do another one with probably your least favorite kind. You don't like t because you'd rather x, or because it looks like a plus sign? 9t squared minus 11t plus 2. Now, if you're a guess and checker and can set it up and play with the numbers until it works, go for it. But I'm still going to split the middle term. Because it's a method, it's a process that always works. So again, if you're good with numbers and can kind of play with them until it works, go for it. But I'm going to do the process way. So I want to find a number that multiplies to, what's my multiply target going to be? 18, good. So I want to multiply to 18, and I want to add to negative 11. Remember, factoring always has that little puzzle in it, is what 2 numbers multiply to this but add to this. Negative 9 and negative 2. So are those my answers? Are those the answers to the question, 9 and 2? No, that's how I'll split the middle term. So I'm going to take negative 11t and rewrite it as minus 9t minus 2t. We've split the middle term. The name of the method, take the middle term, split it up. Next is factor by grouping. But most people, if we make it this far, you're good, because grouping is easy. So I can factor out a 9t. That leaves t minus 1. What can I factor out of the next 2? I'm going to factor out a negative 2, because then my leftovers will be t minus 1. And I really like it when the leftovers are the same, because then I can factor out the t minus 1, and that leaves 9t minus 2. Before we solve, though, again, there are people whose brain works in such a way that they can jump all the way to there. They just start playing with the numbers, and they can see it, and they just figure it out. Like, they just start guessing, and if you can do that, that's fine. Some of you can probably do that, and that's okay. If that's too much, then do the process. Process works every time. All right, yesterday we stopped there, but yesterday we didn't have equal to 0. Now we've got equal to 0, and we were told to solve. So it's easy from here, right? Set each factor equal to 0. I'm going to skip a step here. So t equals 1, and t equals 2/9. Those are our solutions, our zeros, our roots. All those kind of mean the same thing. They're also the x-intercepts. All those words kind of interchangeable. By the way, if we were going to graph this, those are our x-intercepts. 2/9 is kind of a pain to graph, so our scale needs to be really big. Like there's a 0 at 1. There's a 0 at 2/9. Who knows? That's not exact, obviously, but somewhere in there is 2/9. And I know this thing's a parabola, so I know it looks something like that. We're not really going to be graphing them yet, but the homework has some graphs that help you understand the connection between the x-intercepts, the roots, the zeros, the solutions, and the factors, and the original equation, like trying to go back and forth between all of those. All right, so factoring. If you can factor, the factoring method's pretty easy because you just set the factors equal to 0. So the extra stuff from yesterday today is that last little line. So factoring isn't hard if you know how to factor. Maybe that's an obvious thing to say. Square root method. Now, square root method is great, but it only works if b is equal to 0. So it's like, that's a nice method you got there, but it doesn't always work.
The number right above or in front of the x, like just the normal x. Yeah.
Oh, b. Yeah, b is the number in front of x. The middle term. So if there is no middle term, if b is 0, if it just looks like 4x squared minus 28 equals 0, then we're eligible for the square root method.
If it was like 4x squared minus x minus 28.
Right. So if there was anything in the middle there, we couldn't use the square root method.
Because that would be 1.
Because you wouldn't be able to get, b would be 1, and you wouldn't be able to get x squared by itself. So job 1 with the square root method is to get x squared by itself. So 4x squared equals 28. X squared equals 7. Square root method is pretty easy too, as long as you remember one key thing. Plus or minus. When you put the square roots on, don't forget the plus or minus. No, but I divided by 4 and then took the square root. So sometimes I will refer to this as the plus or minus square root method, which is a lot of words, but it reminds you to put the plus or minus on there. All right, why don't you try this one? 2x squared plus 36 equals 0. Fair warning, though, it works a little different than the first example we tried. So give that one a try, and then we'll see how we compare. I still need the plus or minus on there. So the negative comes out as an I. Let's see, 18 would be 9 and 2. So 3 square root of 2. I guess that's not wrong. It just looks funny that the I is in front. Plus or minus 3I root 2 would be the better way to write that. I mean, this wouldn't be wrong. It just looks funny to math people. Maybe you don't have enough math experience to even think that it looks funny, which is fine because it's not wrong. It just
funny either way.
So, could you not just square root it first and then divide by 2? And you just get...
No, you can't square root pieces of a side of an equation. You got to split them apart and then square root the entire.
Yeah, yeah. But like,
so I can't say square root of 2. Yeah, don't square root until you get x squared by itself. Otherwise, you're going to mess up somewhere. Back to the graphing thing on plus or minus square root of 7. That would be, I don't know where square root of 7 is, but plus or minus would be on either side. That wouldn't be bad. What kind of roots? Like, where's 3i root 2?
It's somewhere on the graph.
It's somewhere on the graph. What's the I mean?
It's
imaginary. So there aren't any real roots. There aren't any real x-intercepts. This one would look something like this. There's no places where it crosses the x-axis. That's sort of the connection of why is this weird? Well, it doesn't have any x-intercepts. Roman numeral 3. It's one of my favorite things to teach all year. Because I missed my chance to try out for The Voice or American whatever, Who's Got Talent, or I have a song.
You have a song?
And maybe my song won't reach millions, but it'll at least reach 30, right?
Well, like, more like 100.
That's true. Plus, I'm gonna post this on YouTube. Like this could go viral. Like someone's gonna have to get 12 minutes into the video, but it would be worth it for them to hear me sing this song.
Someone's gonna clip it. Don't worry.
Yes. Clip it. Make it a.
Follow on TikTok.
Yes. I'll be famous. I'll be famous soon. All right. So here's the song. You've probably heard the song. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. All over 2a.
I hated this because I never remembered it. I could never like.
You couldn't remember the song?
No, I could never.
That's the song from like the Jack in the Box thing.
Yeah, the little, maybe some notes would help. Those eighth notes, I don't know. I don't remember my music theory very well, but those are notes. We'll just leave it at that.
You took music theory?
No.
Oh.
I took piano lessons when I was 7. Does that count? No. I mean,
It's close enough.
I mean, if you can play anything, that's other than just.
so let's do the quadratic formula for x squared minus 2x minus 1. Some people do like the quadratic formula because like it's the same thing every time. Once you figure out how to plug in a, b, and c, like factoring is like, oh, I got to figure out what multiplies to this number but adds to this number.
You always use the quadratic formula.
And you can always use the quadratic formula. Like it all. Well, I should be careful how I phrase that. It always works. Like on the test, I can say, "Hey, use this method."
But you won't give us the formula.
And I'm not going to give you the formula. But like generically speaking, quadratic formula always works.
So you're going to tell us not to use the quadratic formula.
I will tell you to use a specific method
You will.
occasionally.
On the test.
Yes.
You're going to be like, hey, use like.
There'll be a few where I specify the method,
It says complete the square.
and a few where I don't specify the method.
Gotcha.
So if you have a choice, some people will always pick quadratic formula. Always, because it works the same every time. And so it takes a little longer than factoring, but it's in some ways easier than factoring because it's very straightforward. All right, what does A equal in this problem?
F1.
And B?
It's positive 2.
Ooh, careful. Well, B is negative 2. Now you're right, we'll use the opposite of B in a minute. but b itself is negative 2.
And then it's negative.
And c is negative 1. After you've done this a few times, you're probably not going to write down a equals, b equals, c equals. But first time through, let's slow it down a little bit here. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now it's just cleanup. Like we've done the formula. Negative negative 2 is 2. Plus or minus. We've got a lot of stuff going on in there. 4 plus 4 because the minus minus. All over 2. Careful using the calculator because you may get something that...
You have to put a plus and then you gotta put a minus. Don't forget about that.
Plus or minus 8 over 2. Square root of 8 is 2 square root of 2. All over 2.
Ooh, that's weak numbers.
Oh, and then now, who gets to cancel here? The 2's. That's not very descriptive, though.
The 2 on the far left.
Good. All the 2's except for the square root. Stuff that's not in a square root is eligible to cancel. So, since 2 will go into everything.
What about those numbers?
So it's plus or minus the square root of 2.
Yeah.
Well, 2. What's 2 divided by 2?
1.
1. So that didn't go away. That's still there. 1 plus or minus the square root of 2. Well, I mean, I guess if you want to put a 1 there, you could. That wouldn't change anything, though. All right, so the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
So it's 1 plus or minus 2.
1 plus or minus square root of 2.
Yeah.
Last method, least favorite method. If you're looking at the worksheet, it's the first set of problems. Complete the square.
Just get rid of this one.
No, because if you get rid of this one, you wouldn't be able to use the quadratic formula, because this is where the quadratic formula comes from.
So you have to complete the square before getting the
Now, we don't have to complete the square before using the quadratic formula. We just accept it. But the quadratic formula comes from completing the square. Yes, sir. Of course I'm going to force you to use it on the test. You knew the answer to that before you asked it. All right, for complete the square, a has to be 1. We will probably give you only ones that have a equals 1, because if a isn't 1, then it just becomes a giant mess. It can be done, but it's a mess. All right, so I'm going to kind of go 2 columns here. We're going to start with the problem, and we'll list the steps and work the problem kind of in parallel here. X squared minus 4x minus 7 equals 0. Now, obviously you've done this before because you winced when I said complete the square. Do you remember what to do first?
All I remember is that it was painful. Cry.
Okay, after you finish crying,
Go over, cry again.
cry some more. But at some point you'll need to move C over
Fetal position. Oh.
through your tears. Move C out of the way. Because we want to complete the square of the left side, so we need to clear out some room. Now, step 2 is going to seem kind of silly, but it's so important that I'm going to list it as its own step. Find B. Well, that's a pretty easy step. B is negative 4. And then kind of the heart of complete the square is this next step. It's really 3 steps, but I'm going to just group them all together because I'm going to say this phrase together over and over and over again. Do you remember what you do with B after you've located B?
You square root it.
You don't square root it. You are gonna square it, but that's the. But before you square it, you half it. Or I guess HALVE would be the verb form of that. Halve it. Half it. Half it, square it, add it. Right, it's like the that old little toy thing. Twist it, bop it, turn it. Half it, square it, add it. That's what we're going to do, though. So half it would be -2.
You made a bop it that did that. Then it.
Half it.
I like it. Yeah. If you could customize.
When we square it, we get 4. So we'll add 4 to both sides. Half it, square it, add it to both sides. You can't just add it to one side. That'd be illegal. When you factor, it always factors the same way. So it's not really a hard factoring problem because it always factors with b over 2. So right side's 11, 7 plus 4. Left side, like you can think about factoring it like the old factoring way, what multiplies to 4 and adds to -4. But there's a shortcut. It's always whatever b over 2 is. Always. So you don't really have to think about factoring it. You can just use b over 2 every time.
How did -2 become positive?
Because I halved it and then I squared it and then I added it. Half it, square it, add it. Bop it, turn it, twist it. How did I get this x minus 2? I factored this. So x and x, multiply to 4 and add to 4 would be -2 and -2. But it always works that way. So I don't have to do this step. And you can if you want to, but it's always going to be b over 2.
So whenever you half it, right before you square it,
That's just part of the process. Half it, square it, add it.
Yeah, but like if you half it, like before you square and add, is that going to be the number that you put in the squared, or like the x?
Yeah, this b over 2 will always be the factor that you use.
Okay, cool.
So even if you're not great at factoring, who cares? Just use b over 2 every time.
Okay.
And then we'll solve using the square root method, or the plus or minus square root method. So I got x minus 2 squared on the left side. I'd like to get rid of the squared.
So you just
wouldn't it just be the original equation up there, like x squared minus 4x plus 4?
If I multiplied it out, I would get back to there, yeah.
Oh.
But I don't want to do that, because then you're right, I'd be going the wrong way in the problem.
Gotcha. See, I think I could drive backwards in Mario Kart, so.
Then move the 2 over. 2 plus or minus square root of 11.
Lackey hates me.
Huh?
Lackey, like little guy.
So where did you, step 4, where did you get the x? I see we got the -2, but where did you get the x squared and the 11?
So the 11 was
comes from the 4.
7 plus 4. That's the right-hand side.
The other one comes from the brain.
The left-hand side is just factoring. But again, you can factor like you usually factor, or you can factor with the shortcut that always works with complete the square.
So step 4 equation is a factored form of step 4.
Yes. You factored the left and just added the right. All right, your assignment is worksheet 3, and yes, the first 3 are complete the square, and then solve by any method, and then some multiple choice problems that might make you think a little bit.